All right, gentlemen, fire up, because here we go. If you're listening to this particular podcast within a few days of its release, this coming Wednesday, February 28th, is when we're going to have that masterclass for men that a lot of you guys have been requesting for quite some time now. That, of course, is the one on how to be interesting. Listen, gentlemen, you can be masculine, you can be confident, but if you are boring women to death, guess what? You're still not going to get anywhere with them. And I'll tell you, a lot of us as men completely realize that we're not exciting, and in fact, we're boring. Heck, we even bore ourselves. We know it's time to level up in this department. We need to become more interesting, more intriguing to women so that they'll want more of us. And I'll tell you something. When you become this guy, you get more respect and admiration even from your fellow men. So let's get after it, gentlemen. How to be more interesting. This coming Wednesday, February 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's GMT -5 for you guys all over the world. Grab your ticket at mountaintopodcast.com/masterclass and finally get your breakthrough to being the man who's intriguing, exciting, and yes, interesting to women. Secure your seat at mountaintopodcast.com/masterclass.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
All right, gentlemen, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. As always, I am your host, Scot McKay, at Scot McKay on X, on YouTube, just about everywhere except Instagram, where I'm at Real Scot McKay. The website is mountaintopodcast.com, and if you haven't joined the Facebook group just yet, it is the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. Y'all come, y'all join us. Great group of guys. A lot of you guys should be part of a men's group. And if you're not doing that in real life, I suppose the next best thing, and at least a good place to start, would be to come on and be a member of this particular Facebook group, the Mountaintop Summit, where we all are talking about being more masculine men and more attractive to women. Speaking of which, I have a new friend on the phone today. He and I have been talking before we hit record on this particular podcast. He's a good guy, and he is the creator of children's books. Millions of copies sold of children's books. And check this out. I don't think he'll mind me calling him out as being exactly the same age as I am, which is 57 right now, by the way. He is a new dad. He's got a baby under a year old, which is directly related to the story we're going to tell today, or he's going to tell, and I'm going to listen, about how he went through a rough divorce, started dating again, even hired a dating coach. And one of the most important factors for him going from the devastation of divorce to finally meeting women, being attractive to them and being attracted to them, of course, and finally meeting the woman of his dreams was having a best friend, having a wingman, not just to go out to bars and clubs and kind of talk you up with the chicks who are there, but someone who is kind of going through the same thing you are, who you can talk to man about this. And we've never covered that subject on the show before. And frankly, the word I use to describe it is beautiful. I think it's a beautiful topic, and I think this episode in particular is going to inspire you, but I'm telling too much of the story already. Adam Gamble from Cape Cod, Mass, which is a beautiful part of the world. Welcome to the show, man.
Hi, Scott. Thanks. It's tremendous to be here on the mountaintop with you. Really appreciate your podcast. Really appreciate the topics that you're exploring in all these interviews that you've done, and big admirer of your body of work, and grateful to be here.
Well, thank you, sir. And back at you. I am in awe of anybody who is responsible or who has succeeded to the point of millions of anything, let alone copies of books sold. That's just remarkable. And so you've written lots of children's books. How has that affected your outlook as a man towards the world to be a writer of children's books? I think that's a good place to start.
I think I
got into writing in a search for spirituality that I had from a young age. But really, the focus on children's books was probably in some level dealing with my own childhood. But the big thing for me was having, as you were talking about, a male friendship with my buddy Michael Tougias. And at the time we first started being friends, is we were both also at the beginning of our careers as wannabe writers. And this friendship, based around our shared passion for sports fishing, created a space for us to meet regularly, year after year, and stick together, spending high quality time together, and then encouraging one another in our careers. Then what happened was Michael went through a divorce after we had been friends for many years. And 1 year later, to my surprise, I found myself going through my own divorce. So, that's really what led us to be able to support one another through that difficult time.
Well, that's very interesting. You all were friends for quite some time before this whole idea of divorce and getting back out there and dating again happened. And like most men, you became friends through a shared interest, through a shared activity. And fishing, there's a lot of downtime. It's the two of you guys on a boat, and you get lots of time to talk about life, get to know each other. And over the course of decades like that, you become pretty much best friends, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Michael is a New York Times bestselling author. So after, 20 years, 25 years of our fishing friendship, I think we've just hit 25 now. So about 24 years, he really had been pestering me to co-author this book, The Power of Positive Fishing, because it was so transformational in his life and in my life, that friendship. And right now, for example, last year, the Surgeon General of the United States came out with a statement that there is a national epidemic of loneliness in our country. And also, an article from the Washington Post, I know, was Men Are Lost. So there's, I think right now in our country, coming out of COVID, a real need for men to have that male friendship. And Michael wanted to tap into that by telling our story on how friendship between two guys made a difference for us.
It's a hot topic around here, Adam. Most men are finding it very difficult to connect with other men and build meaningful friendships with other guys. It feels even weird and possibly even homosexual to a lot of guys to approach another dude and say, hey, you know what, I want to be friends, especially if that guy isn't involved, in a bowling league or a softball Parks and Rec kind of thing where he can meet with other guys and have that shared experience together. I mean, guys who've been in the same fraternity, guys who were in the same platoon in the military together, those guys have buddies for life. Those guys may not be local to them, but at least they can connect with them and talk to them. But for a whole lot of men in this day and age, what you're talking about is exactly correct. There was some kind of unfortunate study out there that I've cited time and again on this show that demonstrated that the average number of close friends most American men have is 0. That's the average. Wow. So it's closer to none than 1 for, all men combined. So this is huge. Yeah. And so what happened is both of you ended up finding yourself single again. And the term wingman is bandied about. We go to a bar and we bring a buddy with us and we both help each other hook up with chicks by talking each other up. I'll take her, you take her. Here's 2 of them. Let's talk to them together. That sort of thing is what we think of in terms of having a wingman. But when you have a guy you can talk to about your relationships with women, suddenly you don't feel all alone when you're quote unquote back out there again. How did that look for you and for Mike?
It was huge having that friendship. And I also appreciate your having male groups, men's groups that you sponsor and that you encourage people to be a part of. Whatever way that men can commit to finding friends and to keeping friends and being friends to other guys, I think is huge. So for Mike and I, and we try to dramatize this in The Power of Positive Fishing. When Mike first started thinking about his divorce, he, brought it up to me on the boat and we talked about it. And by then I had known his wife and known him. And one thing we developed immediately was an ability to be not mean to each other, but definitely brutally honest. So we try to be kind in our advice to one another, but we also never pull a punch with one another. So he immediately came to me and was like, I don't know if my marriage is going to last. And he was talking about how that might unfold for him, et cetera. And when you go fishing with another man, we rarely went out for 3 or 4 hours. It was usually 6 or 10 hours. So, activities like hiking, activities like these men's group, camping, golf, which is a good half a day, of golfing, those kind of activities, or even going to a football game regularly when you go hours in advance for the tailgating. Those can be really great activities to develop those male friendships where you can open up and share. So I kind of served as a sounding board for Mike during that time. And then to my surprise, based on, my own culpability, largely to the end of my marriage, suddenly I found myself a year after Michael's had begun in the same situation as his, losing a long-term marriage in which we both had children. I had been married 20 years. Mike had been married more than 20 years. So many of your listeners may know how emotionally distraught you can be to have an end of a relationship that long and that deep. But to have each other, somebody else who had gone through it, was absolutely just the best thing for both of us. And then we both also soon found out after we got into our divorce, our separations, it's a process. It takes a year or two to get divorced. But as we were going through those processes, I wound up helping take photographs for Mike's internet dating website for him. When I started doing that, he reviewed, my profile, and we started comparing notes about first dates, that kind of thing. And we weren't really wingmen for each other in the sense of going out dating together, but we would meet primarily on the boat, sometimes on the phone, and give each other blunt, honest feedback, while at the same time providing non-judgmental listening as well, where we just provided space for the other one to talk about. A lot of times you hurt the other person in dating. A lot of times they break your heart. It's not an easy thing to go through, even though it is exciting, even though it is wonderful. It's a mixed bag. So having that friendship, as we describe it in the Power of Positive Fishing, really changed both our lives.
So you guys were there for each other, and you've kind of expressed a little bit about what that looked like. You guys were honest with each other. You guys told each other the way it was. You reviewed each other's online dating profiles. For the record, how long ago in history was this?
It was 2011 through 2018 for me.
Okay.
And for Mike, it was around 2010 to 2012 before he found himself in a good relationship. It took me quite a while longer. But then during COVID, Michael had been in about almost 10 years, whatever it was, better part of 10 years, with a very committed girlfriend relationship. And then during COVID, their relationship ended. That was a really straining time for everyone. So Michael went back out into the dating world post-COVID. And again, I got to be a sounding board for him. And I should say that when Michael did his dating, he had a very different approach than me. We were both very determined to find new partners. I think that was one thing that was also good, is that we weren't guys that wanted to play the field for the rest of our lives. We were both guys that wanted to have partners again. So Michael, he laughs about it, but he can be a very determined person. So he went on about between 70 and 80 dates in about a year and a half of meeting women before he found his special person. And he had a very clear-cut way of being efficient. He actually uses the term in the Power of Positive Fishing about his interviewing women and trying to find the right one for him. Me, on the other hand, it took me about 7 years, and I had about 100 dates, which sounds like a crazy number, I know, but 7 years times 12 months, you're going to 84 months. So having a date a month over a 7 or 8 year period is not as crazy as it might first sound. And I count like just even getting coffee with a woman as a date, So we both kind of had different experiences, but they were also both very successful in the long run. Both of Michael's 2 times out, he's found really special women in his life. And as you pointed out, I have the woman of my dreams now, Mildred, as my wife for 5 years now. And we have a wonderful surprise baby boy now. So, they did work out, even though we had very different approaches.
How about that? You said your wife's name is Mildred?
Yeah. And she's Cuban, wonderful woman. She's younger than me. She's 40 and I'm 57. But it just feels right.
What's this butt stuff?
What?
Why put a butt in there?
Good point.
How about and instead of butt? Yeah, she's 17 years younger than me, and
great.
No excuses.
It really
man.
is.
I'm all in on that. Yeah,
my friends and we fit together, and I had a couple of long-term relationships during my dating period after my divorce, and really cared for those longer-term relationships that lasted up to a year. But, when you fall in love, you fall in love. And I hadn't fallen in love yet until I did.
And all the dating rules and all the dating advice goes whoosh right out the window. You don't need it anymore. You just get real, right?
Yep, you're absolutely right. And you did point out too, Scott, and I think it's great that you do it, which is, Michael did not, to my knowledge, read any books or seek any outside help in his except for friends like me, in his dating, when going back, re-entering the dating world after being off the market for more than 20 years. Whereas what happened with me is I was, newly separated. I wasn't quite divorced yet. And I found myself in the post office, waiting in line, and had a little interaction with a really pretty woman. She gave me a really nice smile and seemed really open to talking to me. And I did not know what to do, Scott. I was like tongue-tied. And next thing you know, she's walking out of the post office and out of my life forever. And I was like, what do I do? So I, in the Power of Positive Fishing, one of the stories we tell is that the best thing that we ever did, Mike and I, even though we had been seasoned fishermen, is at one point we hired a guide together. And we learned more in that one day of fishing than all the articles, all the books combined in our lives about how to fish. It just transformed everything for us. And so I went home after that post office non-encounter and remembered, the fishing guide changed everything. I wonder if there are dating guides. I didn't even know if there was such a thing as, people like yourself who can coach you. So I went online and I eventually found a guy who I called, got him on the phone pretty quick. And what I really liked about him, which I know is your MO, which is wasn't a memorize a bunch of lines, just go out there and try to get laid kind of person. I could tell immediately that he was a man of character like yourself, and he was about principle-based dating. And he had some general concepts about me being a better me that he presented to me in our short discussion, which was a free discussion. And I noticed you haven't asked me to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and plug on your website. I know that you give an initial conversation with people for free. It was the same with me with this guy, and I just connected with him and wound up hiring him a number of times over a year and going out with him 2 bars, 2 art openings, 2 parties, and learning how to relax being me, and learning how to, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me as a human being, was learning what I learned from him.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And as I'm listening to you talk, several things come to mind, as the aforementioned professional dating coach. First of all, the detail with which you remember that situation in the U.S. Post Office, where this gorgeous angel of a creature, who I'm sure is exactly who you like, you saw her and went, oh, okay, there's one.
Exactly. Yep.
If you're like me, I'm the kind of guy who can appreciate beautiful women everywhere, but it's like once every 3 weeks or a month where I see one and go, okay, you are exactly what I like, right?
Yep.
And here's the interesting thing. A lot of guys talk about fear of rejection, like she's not going to like me, or she's going to say something mean to me if I talk to her, or fear of bothering women. She doesn't want to talk to me anyway. She's got her, headphones on. She's in another place. when I talk to guy after guy, and my experience also reflects this, but I don't think I'm projecting. I think this is something a lot of guys can relate to. When we think about the times where we just cringe in our history with pretty women, it's almost exactly the situations you talked about. Not anything having to do with a real world, quote unquote, harsh rejection or she didn't like me. It's those times when we see a woman and we know we should talk to her. What the hell's wrong with this? Why don't we just go up and start a conversation? And then it doesn't happen. And just like you said, the tell was she walked out of my life forever. I could still see the faces of at least 3 or 4 women who I should have talked to and didn't. I remember everything about the situation. And if I go back in history, I know there were women who are like, get away from me, you little twit. I don't want to talk to you. But I don't remember them. I don't dwell on them. It's when I didn't give myself that chance. It's when I rejected myself vis-a-vis a woman who's giving me all the right signals. That's when I really kicked myself. And I've heard this story time and time again from guys just like you and me. And it's what got you off top dead center, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
The dating coach that I had hired, he said there's a half-life when you made eyes with a woman, that for a woman to send you the signal that she's actually going to look you in the eye from across the room and even go further than to smile at you, your chances go down. He said if a woman looks at you, you probably got a 90% chance of being able to strike up a nice conversation with her, because she's not going to look at you in the eye very often unless she's actually, somewhat curious. And if she smiles at you, he said you have about a 98% chance of being able to strike up and have a friendly conversation with her.
I love the percentages. Yeah.
Yeah. They're random numbers that just kind of like, rules of thumb kind of thing.
I'm not disagreeing with that, by the way.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. But if you wait, he said to me, if you wait a minute before you make your approach, it's cut in half. You're probably down to 45% chance now because you kind of rejected her. She's put the signal out and you're rejecting. If you wait 2 minutes, cut it in half again, So the idea of like going over fairly rapidly, was kind of drilled into me at that point. He also explained to me a radical idea that I didn't understand, which is that most women who aren't with another man at a bar or single are there because they would like to talk to a man. The majority, that it's much cheaper to stay at home if they want to drink and buy a bottle. And it's much easier not to get dressed up and put on makeup and nice clothing. So the most women are there because they actually would like somebody to come up to them and talk to them. And that to me was like, really? Why did I not know something as obvious as this, So, but the key point was though, that I needed to be well kempt, at least presentably dressed, appropriately for the atmosphere. And I needed to be clean with fresh breath and smiling and friendly,
I think the women would say that's a man who's well put together.
Yeah. So if I put myself together decently, most women are going to be perfectly fine with my coming up to talk to them. And a little story that happened to me was I had a guy come up to me at a bar once and start talking to me. And it took me a little while to figure out, but that he was gay and I'm not gay. But when he came up to me and started talking to me, I was like pleased. I really, when I reflected back on it, I was pleased that somebody just wanted to talk to me. And I realized that even the women that didn't want to date me, didn't want to give me their number, weren't really that interested in me, are perfectly flattered to have a presentable human being come up to them of any sex and just talk to them, So that really set me at ease. And then I started practicing, it was like fishing in a way. I have this line in my chapter about dating and the power of positive fishing where I'm like, women are not fish. Dating is not fishing, as kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. But at the same time, there's so many parallels, you have to, when you're going fishing, you have to go where the fish are. If you just choose a place at random, like a post office, and hope to catch fish, in the middle of the ocean, forget it. You really need to hunt around and find out where are the fish congregating, where the sandbars near where other fish are, so go there.
Oh, man.
And in my case, I had to go to bars. I had to go to parties. And then I had to practice, just like with my fishing, I had to practice my cast and practice having the courage to just say, hey, how you doing? Not having a fixed pickup line, but just be myself. But my biggest lesson he also drilled into my head was I needed to become my own good time. And that meant doing internal work. In other words, I needed to have a good time wherever I was with myself or with whoever I met, even if I only met a bouncer at a bar and had a good conversation with him. I needed to not be dependent on what women did I meet, how she responded. I just needed to be happy being Adam. So anyway, I put that out there, and I tried to explain it more in our book, but I hope that got it across.
Man, how can you not take risks out there socially when your last name is Gamble? Come on, man. You got to go for it.
Yeah, my middle name isn't Gamble. My last name is. There you go.
Right. Your middle name isn't Gamble, okay? Yeah, fair enough. Man, you're going to trigger a rant extraordinaire with me here. Okay, first of all, you're talking about women not being fish, and I have to bring this up from a purely whimsical perspective. Do you remember the old Don Knotts movie, Mr. Limpet, where he wants to be a fish? It's kind of like half live action, half animated. And he's got like a normal wife and everything, and he turns into a fish and he finds a girlfriend. And the girlfriend is the horniest, most upfront little vixen with these eyelashes, but she's a fish. And Don Knotts is Don Knotts in the movie, and he becomes the fish version of Don Knotts. And she's wanting to go to the spawning grounds and get it on. And he's like, well, hold on a second, lady fish. I'm a happily married man. And then the lady fish kind of pokes her head up out of the water and sees his wife looking for him when she finally finds out he's turned into a fish. And the lady fish kind of says in this catty way, maybe she was a catfish, right? Or he got catfished, right? Well, she's not much to look at, is she? Right? And they're all catty towards each other. But that's the first thing I thought about when we were talking about women not being fish is if you're Don Knotts, women are fish, and they can be pretty hot. This idea of women, all the way back, let's go from where you started. This idea of women looking at you, smiling and making eye contact. First of all, most men don't have the balls to do that. So a lot of guys were probably rolling their eyes when you were saying that, saying, as if that ever happens to me. But, you live in Boston, and I've been there, and women can be kind of socially bold. I mean, Bostonians are bold people. That's why you're great sports fans, And you're absolutely right, and your dating coach is exactly right, who, by the way, is based in Boston. You told me who he is, and he seems like a great guy, and I'll probably invite him on the show so we could talk shop. But it is great to have someone in your hometown take you out in field, because if that's what you're into, obviously you don't want to fly around all over the place if you don't have to. Although guys fly here all the time, because they want to work with me specifically, and that's cool too.
Yep.
But when a woman looks at you and makes eye contact and smiles, that's extremely bold and it's extremely brave. And here we are as men, and we don't have the balls to look at a woman and smile at her.
Right.
And then we forget, and this is a very astute observation on your part, even though it seems obvious, like you said, which I smiled at because you're absolutely right. It seems obvious when you know the truth and you look at it objectively, like as a third party, not like this is happening for me, right? But of course she's going to feel rejected if you do nothing. She's human. I mean, I have this saying, men are from Earth and women are from Earth. Yeah? We're all basically humans, right? We're not separate species. She's not an alien.
Exactly.
And if she had the wherewithal and the sheer guts to look at you and smile and you do nothing with it, she's not going to understand you're afraid of her. She's not going to understand shyness. She's going to be saying to herself, what's a girl got to do here?
Right.
So
exactly.
When you don't do anything with it, she feels the rejection you were so afraid of. And that's right. That's an incredible transformational viewpoint for most men. You know what I mean?
I think it is.
Yeah. And then, you talked about being put together. And so when you feel good and you realize you're at your best, then you're going to be able to talk to women. And this concept of having a conversation with women and being your own good time, I really like that. The way I would put that with men is more practical, perhaps, in that I tell men we're too serious. Yes. Everything is a competition. It's acceptance or rejection. I mean, everything is so gunfighter serious. We take ourselves so seriously. It's like we punch out of our day job and punch into our nighttime job, which is, oh God, I got to go out to meet women. It's not that you have to do this. It's that you get to do this. And it's not that you have to approach women. It's that you get to approach women. And if men could just get it through our thick noggins, Adam, that we can be masculine, we can be manly, and still be warm and light and God forbid, have a little bit of fun sometimes, what we're going to do is we're going to be more attractive to women, and then we're going to ignite that feminine nature in them that wants to have fun, that wants to be playful, and boom, then I bet you're more like your friend Michael, who I'm sure a lot of guys were just throwing rotten tomatoes at the screen when you were telling us about. He goes on 100 different dates in 2.5 weeks, right? And he's calling all the shots, and the women all love him, and he's saying, I want to go back out with you and not with you. And most guys would consider that paradigm to be a uniquely female phenomenon. That's something women get to do. We guys have to sit here and suffer rejection or acceptance. But Michael was out there calling the shots. And all these guys are probably saying to themselves, okay, Michael is a New York Times best-selling author. All he has to do is hang that shingle on his Match.com profile, and voila, all the chicks are going to come running. That's not how women work. Just like it should have been easy for you to say, look, I have sold millions of children's books. What woman wouldn't possibly think I'm incredible? But, it takes more. It takes the warm fuzzies. You have to make women feel a certain way, right?
Well, I will admit, Michael is a good-looking guy for sure. And he's a different guy than me. He, I think, was much more emotionally prepared for his divorce than I was. So he was kind of together, and so he was able to go at it in a healthier way than I did. I, unfortunately, was really heartbroken by my divorce, really down in the dumps. And sadly, I lost both my mother and my brother within 2 years of my divorce. So it was a very difficult time for me. I was pretty distraught. I'm also not as immediately good looking as Michael. My good looks are more inside.
But you're not an ugly bastard either. I saw you.
I have a radio face. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I don't know.
Just kidding. No, I'm fine. I'm fine, really. But I had more to overcome than Mike in getting back out in the field and meeting women. So one thing that my coach had said to me, he said, Adam, you're so serious, and this goes to what you were saying, Scott. He said, you're so serious. You should smile. If you smile hard enough that you start feeling like an idiot, you're probably like near a normal person at that point. You need to smile more. Don't be so, heavy and smiling. So I actually started, it sounds a little silly, but one of the things that I struggled most with that Michael didn't was smiling, And so I actually started practicing smiling in the mirror sometimes, especially in the morning after I shaved. I would just hold a smile on my face. I had read somewhere that if you can smile and feel depressed smile for 5 minutes and feel depressed, that's pretty unusual. That most people, if they just hold a smile on their face, they start feeling better. So that was a big challenge for me, was overcoming, my own internal struggles, having that friendship with Michael. So I was spending time, I was like sort of a suffering guy, and Michael's healthiness just naturally wore on to me as we spent more and more time together. And I could see him, he's 12 years older than me. He's not a father figure per se, but a big brother, sure. Michael was a real example to me of what I could become and somebody to model. I think having friendships, even when they're with younger people today, some of my younger male friends, I try to model their behavior.
Now, hold on a second before you continue, and I think where you're going is a great place. I want to underscore something here. What you just indicated is that Mike was in his late 50s and having his pick of all these women he was going out on a date with.
Yep.
He was not a spring chicken when he was doing this.
Nope.
So that's the power of how you're making women feel on these first dates and the inspiration you're giving them to go out with you regardless of your age or whatever.
Yeah.
But continue.
So Michael wasn't necessarily a mentor to me, but he was definitely a big brother, someone I could model, someone that by spending time with another male friend, having an open relationship with a guy who I told, my struggles with being able to smile naturally in bars and to overcome that. Many times we shared stories of being rejected by women, just like we shared many stories of having our manuscripts rejected by publishers we were submitting to, and just like, quite honestly, many casts that we had out on the boat didn't yield a fish, and so we were able to really encourage one another, and having him be there for me in that way was just something I'll just always be grateful for.
You know, a lot of times we hear in the masculinity movements, especially nowadays, but I think this messaging I'm about to talk about has been there probably for a good 15 years, which would put it around the time frame you guys are talking about, is that we're supposed to be stoic. Men are supposed to be serious, you know, have online dating profiles where you're looking off in the distance angry with furrowed eyebrows and women will come running. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't. I mean, if you go watch all the leading men in Hollywood history who women love, they were strong, confident, manly men, but they smiled with their eyes. They were warm. You know, what I always tell these guys is you don't ever see Clint Eastwood as the man with no name in the spaghetti westerns with a hot chick by his side. Right? You know what I mean? You don't see the Mandalorian scoring with all those, you know, hot, badass chicks in that TV show either, right? By the way, the similarities between the Mandalorian and that character that Clint Eastwood played are remarkable if you start listening for it. Although I think Mandalorian's character is a little bit more fatherly and a little bit more compassionate. But however, at least in the first couple of seasons, you know, he really doesn't have a whole lot of time and place for women in his life at the romantic level. But you watch like Robert Redford and Paul Newman in movies, and you see Cary Grant and all these guys, Gregory Peck and Roman Holiday, and, you know, the aforementioned Newman and Redford and Butch Cassidy, and women are just swooning over these guys because they're manly as all get out, but they have this ability to smile with their eyes and be a little playful in the process. And it's just like waving a magic wand with women to be that guy. And so many men just never realize it. They don't even give it a try. So bravo for, you know, modeling this in front of the mirror until you got it right. And then look where you are now, right?
Yeah. And, you know, you bring up some great points there, Scott. This idea of being playful and having fun, you know, I think that's really attractive to women. Michael's got a great laugh. And I know that was a real successful part of his, you know, whole charisma in meeting women and finding the woman of his dreams. But I had to kind of like do internal work. I realized for me, you know, especially comparing myself to one of my best friends, Michael, if not my best friend, you know, was that I needed to work on myself inside. So I did that. And Michael would often say to me, he'd say, you know, I bet you there's a woman out there doing push-ups to try to be a better woman right now, just like you're doing them to be a better man. And you guys are going to meet one of these days. And, you know, so he encouraged me that way. He believed that there was an ideal woman out there for me, even after he had found his match, you know. And so he really encouraged me to keep doing that internal work. And it paid off, you know, and I still to this day, now that I'm, you know, remarried, I still am trying to do that internal work to be a better writer, to be a better publisher, to be a better person, be a better father, you know. And I think that makes me attractive to my wife today, is knowing that I'm trying to improve on a regular basis.
Yes. You know, Latinas, especially Cubanas, they're not going to put up with any BS where you're this weak guy she has to carry and be the mommy too instead of a lover. You did something right. And listen, man, I so appreciate your vulnerability in sharing this story with us. One of the things I really want to drive home with these guys, because it's a point that we don't make enough on this podcast, is it is not gender specific for us to kind of have low self-esteem a little bit when it comes to the concept of other women out there preparing to meet us, just like we're trying to be the best man to meet the best woman. And of course, the website around here is deservewhatyouwant.com, which when I first registered it with the Nick like 20 years ago was a novel concept. I mean, if you put in quotes on Yahoo back in the day, deserve what you want, Charlie Munger, who of course is basically second in command over at Berkshire Hathaway and a billionaire in his own right, is the only guy who would ever coin the phrase deserve what you want before I did. And to me, it made perfect sense. If I want to get the kind of woman in my life I want, I have to be the man she's looking for.
That's right.
But honestly, I think a lot of us guys know that. We've internalized that, but only in one direction. Like no matter how much I try, I'll probably still fail and I won't be enough for the right woman. And meanwhile, we picture all those pretty women out there just sitting around rejecting men. Like, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. Well, you start talking to women and you start talking about dating with them. Single women who are, attractive and they're going out on dates, they're spending hours getting ready. They're wearing the cute underwear just in case something happens. They're hoping, they're hopeful. They're hopeful on first dates that something good is going to happen. And it's indeed true. There are women out there making the effort to be a better woman because they want to meet a guy like you. And that's a transformational perspective for a lot of men. Indeed, when I was a kid, it was unfathomable to my 16, 17-year-old self that a little girl my age would be getting ready to go out on a date with me and putting time and effort to it to look cute. And then they would show up and look cute. And I'm thinking like, well, they always look that way. My goodness, she's adorable, right? That's not the case. They care. Right. They're going after it. They're working. And, a lot of these guys are really cynical at them. They're like, well, all women just want to use you. They're no darn good. All these men going their own way, guys who, by the way, they don't like my work. They don't like what I'm about. They want to be angry and bitter. But when you understand that women who are hopeful in the same way you're hopeful and who are trying to be, quote unquote, put together the same way you are, when you meet each other, of course you're going to like each other, and of course you're going to deserve each other. And it is really nice when you unwrap that package and she's gone the extra mile to wear a really cute lingerie. And it was just for you. I mean, she doesn't have another date later. Her evening was for you. And when we can relax into that and realize, hey, you know what? It's kind of good to be a guy. And when I get out of my own head and indeed get out of my own way, dating can actually be fun. This journey can actually be enjoyable. It's not a race to the finish line. I've got to find a woman, who's my soulmate or else I'm going to die alone, blah, blah, blah. It becomes more play than work. And then what do you know? Your attitude reflects it on dates, doesn't it? You're more playful. You're bringing out this playful feminine nature in her. And then the rich get richer. You start being successful and then the snowball just gets rolling until you go, you know what? Where's this been my whole life?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And, listening to you and with your wisdom, it reminded me of a moment when a couple years into our friendship that I explained in The Power of Positive Fishing, where Michael said to me, I want to manifest a New York Times best-selling book, and I want to manifest a movie. And I was like, my mind just did this double take. I was like, he wants to, first of all, the idea of manifesting was a little new to me, but the bigger point was that I realized I was out there fishing with a guy. I had a friendship now with this guy who wanted to have a New York Times best-selling book, and he wanted one of his books to become a movie. And I was like, I didn't believe him. And not because I didn't think he was good enough to do it, but because on some level, I didn't think I was good enough to be hanging out with a guy who did those kind of things.
How about that?
Yeah. As I spent more time with Mike and our friendship developed, I was like, well, if he can do that, then why can't I? So having these male friendships, if it's just me in my head alone, then I'm kind of stuck with those thoughts and they're going to start repeating themselves. But when I connect with other men, listen to podcasts, I've listened to a bunch of yours, it opens my mind to new possibilities. If one man can do it, another man can do it, is the old saying, right? And then same thing with the dating. As Michael met he brought her out fishing with me one time once he met the girl of his dreams. The first time they were together, like I said, for about 10 years. But he brought her out fishing with us. And I was like, hold on, she's my age. I'm 12 years younger than him. And she's with him. I'm still out here, flailing. But then I realized if Mike can attract a woman who I considered very attractive at my age and him being 12 years older, I was like, then maybe I could attract a woman similarly younger than me, similarly pretty. Not that it necessarily needs to be. I've met women older than me too that I just sent me crazy, but just to meet a woman of what I consider like that caliber with a high character and a lot of beauty. And I was like, if Mike can do this, I can do this. So having that friendship, as he and I try to dramatize in our book, opened us to this new possibility, new ideas. And without those new ideas and new possibilities, they could never have happened, I don't believe.
Man, that's one hell of a mic drop. I love it. That basically sums it all up. Man, this has been a fantastic conversation, Adam. And I want to point these guys to your book, which is called The Power of Positive Fishing, a story of friendship and the quest for happiness. And despite the absence of dating and relationships and women in the title, you guys talk about it quite a bit in the book. And what I've done is I've put that book at the top of my Amazon influencer queue, which you guys can find at mountaintopodcast.com/Amazon. If you're listening to this particular show within, a week or so of its release, you'll find it right there at the top. Also, when you go to mountaintopodcast.com/gamble, GAMBLE, you won't be sent to an offshore betting site. You'll actually be telemagically sent over to Amazon.com, where you can also grab a copy of the book, The Power of Positive Fishing, a story of friendship and the quest for happiness, authored by Adam Gamble and co-authored by his good friend, Michael Tougias.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, man, you're quite welcome. And Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show and not only sharing your story, but being so honest about it, man. That's just such a breath of fresh air. And I think a lot of guys are really going to be inspired by this. So thanks a million, man.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And definitely we'll have you on. Maybe we'll have Michael on with you. And we had a little bit of a sound issue, which is why he isn't joining us today. But it would be great to have you guys back and maybe talk more about relationships and this lifestyle with the woman of your dreams nowadays. What would you guys think of that?
I'd love to join you, Scott, anytime on the mountaintop. You got it made there.
Yeah, man. We're two guys like to rock the mic. So that's a thing. You got it. And guys, go to mountaintopodcast.com, get in on the latest masterclass for men. Hey, gentlemen, that's a great way for you to team up with a bunch of guys live and in person to talk about a particular issue on being a better man and or getting better with women. It's good camaraderie. Also, like I mentioned, go to the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook and get on board our Facebook group. This isn't one of those Facebook groups where everybody complains about their relationships and gives each other bad shade tree advice. We've done our best to build the precedent for something completely different there, where we support each other, have a little bit of fun, and talk about being better men. That's at the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. When you go back to mountaintoppodcast.com, check out our sponsors, Origin in Maine, Heroes Soap, and also the Keyport. Great products from great sponsors, long-time sponsors, several years now, and you can use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 with each of our fine sponsors for an additional 10% off at checkout. And of course, like we've talked about on this show, guys, I'm at your service. Get on my schedule, talk to me free for 25 minutes or more if we need to, and let's put a plan together to get you in front of some of the women you really want to meet, and hey, get you into a situation sooner than later where you found the right woman for you and you're living the dream like Adam and Mike and I all are over here. That opportunity and more is there for you at mountaintopodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.